Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth have damaged the military. With their endless hopes of them trying to rule our country with an iron fist, Donald Trump has made clear that he wants the United States military, the greatest military in the face of the world, to be his personal attack dogs. And we're not talking about attacking the enemy. We're talking about attacking American citizens. We're not talking about attacking other countries who are aggressive to the United States. We're talking about attacking our Constitution, our freedoms. And there have been reports that some military members that have said, no, we're not going to do that. There are those who bravely say that no, Donald Trump is not a reason for why I should stay in the military, or what he wants to do is reason enough for me to stay in the military. For those people, I applaud them. And I want to give you an example of one. I'm going to read you a Washington Post op-ed piece from a former Lieutenant Colonel of the United States Marine Corps, Doug Krugerman, I apologize. His op-ed piece, I resigned from the military because of Trump. This is a man who served 24 years in the United States Marine Corps, only 2 steps away from getting 1 star on his shoulder to make him a brigadier general. But out of conscience, out of true patriotism, he decided to say, no, I am not serving this country because I can't serve a country led by Donald Trump. Now, he's the one who wrote this, so don't take any inference when I say I or my. I am just repeating exactly what Lieutenant Colonel Krugerman said. But I think you'll get the gist of what I'm saying here. Take a listen. On September 30th, at an unprecedented gathering of senior military leadership, President Donald Trump said, and I quote, "If you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room. Of course, there goes your rank, there goes your future," unquote. I was invited to be in the room on that day, and I decided months earlier that I had to leave. By coincidence, September 30th was my last day as a colonel in the United States Marine Corps. I gave up my career out of concern for our country's future. United States Marine military officers take an oath to defend the Constitution without mental reservation or purpose of evasion. I swore or repeated that oath under 5 presidents, starting with former President Bill Clinton. I risked my life for it, serving as an infantry officer in 2 wars. I watched Marines die for it. No commander-in-chief is perfect. President Clinton's moral failures are well known. President George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq might be one of the worst errors in American history. All recent presidents share responsibility for our failures in Afghanistan. I continue to serve, despite all that, because I believe in the Constitution brought to the country more success than failure, and I believed that past presidents took their oaths to the Constitution seriously. With President Donald Trump, I no longer believe that. During his first term, his actions became increasingly difficult for me to justify, culminating with the attack on January 6 on Congress as it tried to execute its duties. I hoped that he had learned from those errors, but it only took a few days of his second term for me to realize he had not. I could not swear without reservation to follow a commander-in-chief who seemed to so willingly to disregard the Constitution. My departure was not about policy disagreements, which exists in every previous administration. President Trump won in 2024 and has the right to implement his policies within the law. My first revelations are about promises and actions that I thought were morally wrong, even if they were possibly legal. The Constitution gives the President the power to pardon, but pardoning roughly 1,600 people of those who tried to violently overthrow the results of an election didn't help defend the Constitution. Likewise, I didn't see it as moral to deny refuge to Afghans who risked their lives to support us, which he did on January 22nd, 2 days into his administration. Ignoring reality to take advantage of vague laws to assume emergency powers is also immoral. For those who believe in honoring their word, breaking promises our country has made, including some trade agreements Donald Trump made himself, is not moral. These are not the kind of actions that I would risk my life to defend. Worse than immorality, however, has been Donald Trump's willingness to disregard the law and Constitution to achieve his goals. When asked in May about the Fifth Amendment requirements to due process and if he needed to uphold the Constitution as president, the first words out of his mouth were, "I don't know."
Given those numbers that you're talking about, don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know.
This month, National Guard officers received orders from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, that their governors opposed. A federal judge intervened, citing the lack of apparent emergency and the 10th Amendment. Those commanders and units were stuck between completing orders with no clear answer. When the president's orders push or cross legal limits and put commanders in these situations, cohesion within our military is at risk. President Trump's description of Portland as a, quote, war zone, unquote, is as fantastical as his beliefs that the June protests in a few blocks of Los Angeles will somehow obliterate the massive city of nearly 4 million people. In both cases, his words had little connection to reality. Every dubious basis he gives for an order creates more room for doubt, more room for reservations, and more threats to our unity. The president said to military leadership on September 30th of fighting domestic enemies, quoting him, "And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war too. is a war from within, unquote. It wasn't clear if he was referring to an actual crime or political criticism of him. In either case, military force is not the answer. Some of his voters likely dismiss President Trump's seemingly disregard for the Constitution, such as him saying that criticizing the president should be illegal despite the First Amendment, as him exaggerating. Others apparently don't care, believing that achieving their ends justifies any means. This president acts as though one election makes 236 years of constitutional order irrelevant. Instead of trying to work within the Constitution or amend it, President Trump is testing how far he can ignore it. If voters and legislators cannot close the gaps in our laws to clarify the limits of presidential power, those who serve in our government will continue the struggle. The next president of either party may continue us down this path to total collapse. I do not claim to speak for any other person or institution. I respect those who still serve, many of whom have service contracts and simply can't retire like I did. But if they have doubts about their orders, they're not alone. They should be confident in questioning possibly immoral or illegal orders, remembering that they are responsible for their own actions and knowing others are asking the same questions. I voluntarily gave up my rank, as the president suggested, but the future of our country is more important than an individual's career, wealth, or power. I have no regrets about my decision. I have given up the service I love for the freedom to do the right thing, the freedom to speak my mind, and the freedom to speak in defense of our country.